I never saw myself as the person that lit up a room when I walked into it. And then after losing my hearing, and being kind of thrust into an island by myself, I stopped being able to judge myself, and I stopped being able to compare myself with the people, and I stopped caring as much about making mistakes. And what that led to was me singing honestly and purposefully and with just a lot of heart, and people gravitated towards it because they felt like I was holding their hand while we were singing.
Mandy Harvey, awesome to see you. It has been a little while. We've been working on some projects together the last year or so. I want to dig in with you on growing up Mandy Harvey. Let's just start. What do you remember? I know you're born in Cincinnati, Ohio. What do you remember from being a kid?
Gosh, well, I'm one of four, and my parents both worked. My dad worked when I was in Florida because we were in Cincinnati, but I was only there till I was like a year and a half old. Then we moved to Florida, which is home. I'm the only one not born there. And he worked at a place called like Yoder Brothers. It was an agricultural thing. He did the stuff on the back end. My mom was a middle school teacher, and then we moved to Colorado. Growing up in Florida, honestly, I didn't really remember that much other than we lived in the middle of the woods. We were outside all the time. I didn't have any friends outside of family members. I was a very shy kid and very uncomfortable around other people, very socially awkward. And then we moved everything, uprooted, and moved to Colorado for my dad for job, and that was like a start over. Um, and it didn't help. I was still weird. I was still awkward. I went to a very small middle school. There's only 48 kids in my grade level, split into two classes. And I knew the same kids from fifth through eighth grade. And yeah, I was genuinely obsessed with music and absolutely terrified to express it.
So that's so interesting. So you obviously you are a very uh, bubbly, fun, but deep rooted, I understand, person at this point. Um, what made you feel like it sounds like you felt out of place? It sounds like you felt, was there something you think that was holding you back in your own mind to try to, yeah, what was it? Because it doesn't seem like that would have been the case. What do you think it was back then that was making you feel that way?
Well, I had a couple of reasons. I was definitely a nerd. Social awkwardness runs in my family. We're all a little on the spectrum, and so understanding kind of cues and stuff. I didn't really get along with kids my age because they weren't thinking fast enough, and so I was always friends with elderly men. And they would tell me like war stories, and I'd be like, "That's fascinating. Tell me more." But I was bullied a lot. Um, I remember when I was in elementary school, like the kids on the bus would light my hair on fire and stab me with pencils and stuff. So I just didn't talk to people because I never really understood what they were going to do. And it was more self-preservation. And then getting into middle school, I think I went through the typical things that a lot of girls go through. I became very uncomfortable in my own skin, very afraid of people staring at me, and liked being a wallflower like in the background because I wasn't sure how to process myself, so I didn't really want to put anything out there. And it took me a really long time and a lot of failure to realize that that's not that important to me anymore. It's like I've got enough other things to deal with that like being afraid of you staring at me is the least of my problems right now. So it kind of forced a lot of growth going through some of the trauma that I've been through.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, look, all of us at different points in time, some of us hide it in different ways, but felt like we didn't belong, felt like an alien, in our surroundings.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's so fascinating to me, like middle school, having had three children now, either gone through or in middle school. It like seems like for most kids, middle school is that age that you just wish you could actually disappear
Yeah.
because you feel different. And then, as it always turns out, with everyone I've ever worked with that has had incredible success, is that that thing that made you different and made you feel like you stood out is actually your unique
Your
gift that when you
superpower.
accept it and bring it to the world is what makes you who you are. And so I love the fact that we can all sort of, yeah, exactly. It becomes a superpower. So
Yeah.
I love that. Tell me, you said you were obsessed with music. Me too. I have had, really nothing else in my life. I feel like I have been as addicted to as music my entire life. It's my first love, my first addiction. When did you start getting, other than listening to music, when did you start getting into music, started performing, singing? Did you always do it? Like, when did you really
Yeah.
get immersed in it?
Really young. I started at 4 with choir, and I never stopped. My focus was mostly with choir. So I did a lot of performances, but all team oriented. If I was a part of the chorus, I was happy. If I was a part of a musical, I was fine. But I enjoyed the teamwork and camaraderie, the community aspect of it. I think because I was so isolated and I was so lonely, it gave me like forced friends that we were working together to make something beautiful, and I really appreciated it. And also for me, there's such a power that comes with being able to see the words in black and white. When you spend your entire childhood trying not to be different and trying not to mess up, yet the way that you communicate is very connected with lip reading. Um, you just stop talking to people because you know you're going to mess it up. And so with music and performances in that manner, all of the words are there in black and white. Everybody memorizes it. You memorize your cues, and then you don't have to worry about messing that up. You're a part of it without having to, you know, go off on your own tangents. I will say though, one of the most terrifying things that I ever had to do musically, I did a summer camp where we ended up doing vocal jazz and they were doing improv. The most terrifying thing I'd ever done. I love it now, but like the idea of it, because I wasn't sure how I sounded all the time, to know I didn't, it was, oh my gosh, that was the worst, because then everybody's looking at you too. So it just like two different things stacked on top of itself. It's like if it was just one, I probably could have vomited my way and gotten through, but both, I was just like
That's a tough one because jazz is different anyway, and jazz notes are often different, outside of major scales and everything else. So um, it's not only being comfortable enough to sing like that. It's actually believing you're going to be able to hit the notes. Because like I spent a lifetime singing too, but there's certain notes I just don't have, and so it would make me super nervous to try to figure out how to improv around that. That would make me nervous
It's
too.
like a choose your own adventure book, though, because at the end of the day, if you know eventually the one is coming back, you can go any direction you want to as long as you get back to that starting point, then it's fine. And so it's just kind of like I don't know, we're going to find out what happens. And then sometimes you do like a weird choice, but if you do a weird choice, you can make it purposeful and then turn it into something that actually stands out and repeat it again so that people know it wasn't an accident.
When did
So
you
great.
realize when did you realize that you could sing and people wanted to hear you sing?
Um, Honestly, I don't think that that was for a very long time. My focus was always education. I never thought that I had one of those voices that was better than other people. I was constantly critical of myself and constantly comparing myself to others. And um, the interesting part about being in the music industry or choir, even musical theater, drama, is that you have the people who have seemingly all of the charismatic juice, and they're just like, hello. And you're just like, okay, she can have it. Like, just take it.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's yours. I just want to help you shine. Like you go ahead, shine bright little star. But I never saw myself as the person that lit up a room when I walked into it. And then after losing my hearing, and being kind of thrust into an island by myself, I stopped being able to judge myself, and I stopped being able to compare myself with the people, and I stopped caring as much about making mistakes. And what that led to was me singing honestly and purposefully and with just a lot of heart, and people gravitated towards it because they felt like I was holding their hand while we were singing and we had a moment together. And that connection was always far more superior to me than trying to vocally impress you with some amazing belting chop. I would much rather do what's right by the lyric and have it say something meaningful.
It's really interesting. I think what most many performers, whether you like professional speakers to musicians to, I mean, actors, I think a lot of times in immaturity, when they have a really great gift, they don't realize that their job actually isn't as much to blow away the audience as it is to let the audience in, as it
Right.
is to bring the audience on the journey with them. And it's really interesting when you I've watched that journey a lot, just having been in music for a long time. I'm sure you have as well. You see artists a lot of times when they start getting a level of confidence, they often forget that and they stop connecting with the audience.
Yeah.
And then it takes them finding their way back to that vulnerability. It's like, oh, they actually wanted to come on a journey with me. They didn't want me to blow their socks off with this note or that note. So it's interesting to hear that you say that now. For those who are just tuning in and don't know anything about your journey, Mandy,
Yeah.
you saying losing your hearing just probably blew their mind. Tell us about that. Tell us about your diagnosis and what
Yeah.
it means and what happened over the course of your life.
Sure. Well, I was born slightly hard of hearing. I've had hearing issues my whole life. I've had a lot of ear infections, and I end up chewing through my eardrum tissue every time I have an infection. It's a very interesting issues that I have. A lot of tubes in, tubes out surgeries because of deformed eustachian tubes. And uh, later, when I was in high school, I ended up having a lot of surgery on my legs because of dislocation, because I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And turns out when you have a very sensitive system like I did, and nobody knows that you have that diagnosis, your, I guess, progression of treatment um, is what they think is very normal. And then my body couldn't keep up and handle it, so my body attacked itself, and I disintegrated and ate through nerve for my hearing, and I lost a lot of vision. So I went from being slightly hard of hearing to being profoundly deaf in both ears in a matter of about 9 months for the bulk of it, and then kind of petered out after a while. I kind of stopped taking hearing tests. And then I recently started taking them again. I had to take them habitually to get approved for a cochlear implant, but that was 16 years after losing my hearing. But nothing changed. It's still bottomed out, but it is what it is.
When you when did you first know that you had this nerve syndrome issue? And were you
EDS.
told, yeah, were you told that you were gonna, were you given this sort of like prognosis of here's what's going to happen in the future, get ready for it, or what did they tell you?
When I was a kid, they didn't know that I had EDS. I had all the red flags, but it's not something that was super known and common. It's still quite a rare disorder. It's a lot more publicized now because there's more people in the public eye who have it, and so it's kind of raised awareness for it. But when I was a kid, I had never even heard of it. But based off of those little hearing tests that you have to do in school where you raise your hand on the sides where the beeps are. I've never passed one of those in my life, but I've had my hearing tested a lot as a kid, and there was always a small progression of loss. And so it was a conversation that I had had with audiologists since I was very young, saying that if this doesn't stop the small progression of loss, you know, you might be one of those people who's 40 and can't hear at all. Um, and so there's always been this monkey on my back or goblin in the closet or whatever, this like overwhelming feeling of dread following behind me, that eventually I was going to lose the thing that was, for me, one of the most precious gifts that I had. I'm an auditory learner. I do so much of my study and my work based off of holding on to what I can hear. And the idea of that going away was absolutely terrifying and became my biggest fear. The issue with that is, even though I was afraid, I kind of blindly just tossed it into a bag and I was just like, well, I can't. That's just not going to happen. It's probably going to happen, but it's not going to happen. And I pursued music anyway, and I had to work twice as hard as everybody else because I had to compensate for my hearing loss. And very little people knew what I was struggling with unless you knew me very well.
You went to college to
Hmm.
study music. You decided
Yeah.
you wanted to get into teaching of it. Tell us sort of the. I know there. We worked on a documentary together called Hero,
Yeah.
which should be out by the time this comes out. I'm excited for everyone to see it. It obviously recounts a lot of your story, but for those who haven't heard it, tell us about sort of some of those seminal moments in music theory when you realized things were really changing.
Yeah. I first noticed the problem, because of I was in a psychology class. Actually, it's a really big room, and there was like 300 students that could sit in this room. And this your first time in college, you're not having to follow the same rules that you have when you were governed by parents and stuff, which was I always had to sit in the front row in the middle as close to the teacher as possible because that was the only way that I could actually hear them. And so I would sit like wherever I wanted to. And I couldn't understand my teacher, so I kept getting closer and closer and closer and closer till it was back into my typical spit zone seat. And I was about a month or so into school when I stopped being able to understand her at all. And we suspected that it might be an ear infection or some sort of sickness again. Maybe I perforated an eardrum. And I got tested and I had lost a considerable amount of hearing, and we were watching it progress as we kept going in. And um, by Christmas, my first semester, I was labeled, diagnosed, I guess, legally deaf in both ears, which is when you cross the threshold of 55 decibels down in both ears. Um, and then it kept getting worse. So I got fitted for hearing aids and started my next semester with my hearing aids, which I named Hope. And music theory is a man. I really wish that that would like that PTSD of that class would disintegrate. You think with enough time and acceptance and moving forward that you wouldn't be haunted by some of those emotions and memories, but it's just one of those classes, and it was such a pivotal part of my life that I'm not sure I'll move from that. But um, I was sitting in class for dictation, which is a test that I had to take to stay in the class, where the teacher plays on the piano and then you have to listen and then transcribe note for note, rhythm for rhythm, everything correctly. And it wasn't ridiculously difficult. This is probably what we're in music theory two. Um, and I was really excited and amped. I had my hearing aids, so I was just like, I've got all the tools. I've got my pencils. I've got my paper. Let's go. And I'm waiting for the test to start and looking around, and everybody else's pencils are moving but mine. And one by one, as the students got up and they looked at me with this sad, pitiful face of, oh, isn't that's just heartbreaking. Um, it was little nails in the coffin of my dream, and pretty soon I was handed a paper saying thanks but no thanks, and everything shut down from there.
So at this point, even with the hearing aids, could you not hear anything?
I could
Or how?
hear stuff, but hearing aids, they're not like putting on glasses when you have a slight vision loss. Hearing aids can only amplify the sounds that you have. So if you are missing frequencies, they can't give you them back. They can only amplify what you got. So my hearing aids, while they were helpful, they couldn't give me back certain things that were happening. I just didn't know that they were happening. And then the ones that I could get would be loud but muffled and kind of like static on a TV. So without the compensation of lip reading and visually cueing my brain into saying, "Oh, this is what that is," it was very, very, very difficult for me to understand. And then you add in other noises, and it's difficult for your hearing aids to understand one from the other. So you have people coughing, you have people moving, you have air conditioning, you have all these different noises, and a microphone picks all those things up at the same frequency level. And so it gives you information, but it's not discernible.
It's really interesting. I've never heard it said that way. Very very insightful. It's like ADHD for your ears. It sounds like you can't discern with what's more important than the other thing because there's just so much coming at you sensorily.
Right, but it's, at this point, my hearing loss was so severe. Uh, it was like a massive cookie, so there's a lot of those frequencies which would have been present for what he was playing on the piano were just gone. So it would not have mattered if he had sat on that piano with all of his might. You can't get something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, the fact that you were excited for music theory too blows my mind. I did music theory one just to try to get
Oh
because I've
my
been playing
God.
guitar my whole life and I don't. It
No.
like gives me nightmares. Music theory one gave me nightmares,
Oh
so
my
I'm glad.
gosh.
I'm glad you love
I
it.
was such a music nerd, man. That is honestly, if I could find a way to work with a university and get my music degree just to have it on my wall, I would do it. I wouldn't want to have to like go into debt that much for it, but
I think that's doable. Let's think on that one. I think
if,
that's doable. I like that. That's
any
not like an impossible dream.
yeah,
I like this one.
anyone want to give me an honorary degree? I'll work for it, but it's gonna be
We can figure
weird.
that one out. So all right. So you now your that dream is over.
Yeah.
How are you feeling at that point? And you go home. What do you do next?
Oh, I was devastated. I I did all but stop breathing. I think I had made a massive mistake by attaching that singular dream of being in this college, getting this degree, becoming a teacher out of high school, getting my master's degree, becoming this or that, getting my PhD, and then getting a job in a university teaching vocal jazz. I had such a laundry list of my life planned out that attaching my identity into that dream and having that dream fail, it left me with this hollow husk of a person of I don't know who I am anymore. I have no purpose. I have no direction. What do I do? What do I get up in the morning for? And not just what do I get up in the morning for, but now, in addition to all of that complexity, which I think a lot of people can identify with, you have the other side of the scope of how do you wake up in the morning? Um, to a vibrating alarm clock. How are you communicating with people? How are you calling for help? How are you dealing with if you get in a car accident and you need to talk to somebody or call 911, how are you having a phone conversation? Because back then, 2006, you didn't have captions readily available. You didn't have texting 911. You didn't have all of this technology where you could easily, readily communicate. You were just you in the wilderness. Here, find a stick, build some fire, just do it, like smoke signals. Like you're just kind of on your own. And so I had to learn how to survive in a world that I didn't want to be in, and then find a way to not just survive, but embrace who I was, love my differences, love my disability, love my deafness, and build a future.
That's a lot of words with a lot of depth to them, and obviously many years of healing. I mean, just love my deafness. I mean, that to me sounds like an oxymoron, just because that's not what you would have wished for. However, it became a part of you. You had to learn to love it, or probably hate yourself for it. We can dig in some more there. But did you, as you left college and you essentially lost all of your hearing, did you lose verbal communication, or did you get really self-conscious about your verbal communication? Like, what happened there?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, as it was happening, because this was a span of 9 months, where it was really nosediving down. I had friends through my like youth group and stuff like that. I remember isolating myself because it just continually got worse and worse and worse. And lip reading, when you're hard of hearing, for me growing up, that was just normal for me. I didn't realize how much I relied on it. So I did have a skill set there that I could navigate with. However, that doesn't work if people are moving around, if they're not looking directly at you, if they have thick accents, if they don't move their lips. Some people talk through their teeth, some people don't move their upper lip at all, and they talk like a muppet. There's so many factors involved that, again, you're back into like that middle school, elementary mindset of, I don't want to be the stupid person in the room because everybody just assumes I am. Nobody wants to talk to you because they don't know what to say. They're afraid of you because you are going through something traumatic that is messy and dark and you cry. Like, oh, there's the sad girl. Yeah, there's the sad girl. And we're all sad at some point. Buck it up, you know? But my issues brought to light a lot of people's insecurities that their dreams could also break, and so they kind of shuffled away from me more because it was like I had a cancer that they didn't want to catch, and I just didn't communicate much. It became very, very difficult. When I moved back home, my younger sister Sam graduated high school a year early. She gave up having a senior year, prom, all that stuff, so that she could go to community college with me. She took ASL classes with me. My mom started taking classes. My dad started taking classes. And I was still lip reading, but with the benefit of having sign language become my buffer and my aid and then eventually my friend.
Sign language, I know like 5 letters. I think it's probably very under taught. Any advice or any wisdom you would like the world to know, your perspective on what we should be doing with sign language?
Sign language is quite an amazing way of expression. It's not just signed English. You have a visual representation of your tone, of your meaning, and you can communicate on a much deeper level. I think it's extraordinarily beneficial for children who are non communicative, or kids on the spectrum, or people who have a difficulty saying how they feel, because you have other options on the table for you to choose from. Also, for those people who have none of those issues, but they want to order drinks at a bar with their friends and it's loud and they can't communicate and they're trying to scream and no one can hear you, you can talk to your friend and say, "Hey, give me a whatever," and no issues there. But it is a absolutely beautiful language, and one that I wish was more common as a secondary language option.
When you move back home and your whole family is working to support you, which
Yeah.
is probably made you feel somewhat guilty, but it's a beautiful thing that's what they were there for.
Yeah.
So tell me about, how did you start to find new questions to ask? This
Yeah.
podcast is questionable. It's about, what are the better questions I can be asking to find,
Uh,
more success or better things and everything. Like, what were the new questions you started to ask eventually? Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's quite a period of depression and other things, but what did you start to ask?
Well, initially, I was being presented with the idea of what's the worst that can happen. You know, why not try this? What's the worst that can happen? It's not like you can lose your hearing again, which was your biggest fear. So, what's the worst that can happen? Why not start poking around with this? What's the worst that can happen? And I started saying yes to a lot of things because of that question, because I couldn't think of a reason why not to. I had already been stripped of my identity, I had already bottomed out. And so, you know, to fall down to the floor to ground zero was normal. So, eh, I've already built a house. Let's go. You know, if I fall down, it's fine. I'm already home. And so my dad asked me to play guitar with him. So I said yes. What's the worst that can happen? He pushed me to learn a song to sing. He pushed me to try to get connected back with music. Me finding a understanding of feeling vibrations, which was like this eureka moment, and then working tirelessly to create a system for me to visually and tactilely feel music led me to recording a song in my basement, which led me to my music teacher from the past, which led me to singing in front of people at a jazz club, all because I kept saying, well, what's the worst that can happen? Eventually, what I found is that I was surrounded by amazing people who had a lot of differences and a lot of disabilities, and they were constantly battling their own demons and breaking those barriers down. And some of them with a smile on their face. And I still didn't have a smile on my face, even though I was making progress, because I was constantly asking the wrong question. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen is a great starting point. It can get you opening the door. But the problem is the core of it is still negative. You're searching for what's going to break. And you're searching for the idea that, well, it's gonna suck, but I guess it's not gonna suck as bad as it could. You know, that's still a very pessimistic place to be. Eventually, I changed the question to what's the best that can happen? What's the best that can happen by me trying this? Even if I fail, what's the best thing that can happen? What can I learn from this? How can I grow? What are the positive benefits of me putting myself out there and doing this? And that was the question that I asked myself 2 seconds before walking on the stage of America's Got Talent, because I was not there to prove to the world that I'm awesome. I was there to encourage people to get up off the floor and walk with me, because I'm still there and I'm trying to get out. And what's the best that can happen? If I can make one connection, help one person, start one question in conversation, even if I fail, isn't that entirely worth putting myself in that position? Of course.
Well, your perspective of wanting someone, even one person, as we talked about, to walk with you. It's
Mm.
that you want them to come on the journey with you. It's not about I'm here to show you. I'm here to what. So that to me is a massive perspective shift as well. We'll get back to that because obviously there was one very influential person that decided to walk with you from that interview and many other or from that audition, but many others as well. Talk for a minute. I want people to hear your journey of learning to sing again because again, being profoundly deaf, so you can't hear
Right.
your voice. So I have no idea. I don't know how to process that, but talk a little bit about how you found singing again, because I think just the your process is genius, and also
Thank
just the
you.
amount of resilience you had was is mind blowing.
Well, I want to ask you a question, Nick. Do you know the song Happy Birthday?
I do.
Okay. When you sing Happy Birthday, do you think about the notes when you sing Happy Birthday, or is it muscle memory at this point?
It's muscle memory at this point.
Right. So, what I did was play around with this idea of muscle memory. What can I remember based off of innate memory of having sung so many different things, having done so many different scales, utilizing that and moving past the fear? So, I started with visual tuners. I started with a guitar tuner, which has 6 strings. So there's 6 possibility notes. Everything is red until one of those little guys goes green, and you're just like, cool, I made a G, you know? And I just made noise, just a bunch of random ass noise, just until one of those suckers went green. And then taking that note, doing scales with it again and again and again and again and again and again until I could convince myself that didn't matter what it sounded like, didn't matter how strong it was, didn't matter how pretty it was. I was making these notes and they were going in order, and I was coming back to the beginning, and that was good. And then placing my hand on my throat and feeling myself making those notes and feeling where those notes landed, feeling where they shifted, how they buzz in your nasal cavity once you hit certain notes, how they rumble in your chest, and how some of them annoy you right behind the back of your eye, like which ones feel the most so that I can hold on to those as truth. And the rest of it is trusting yourself that even if it's wrong, even if it's not beautiful, you're working your butt off and it doesn't matter, and letting it go. The trusting myself was so much harder than actually opening my mouth and singing, because you can open your mouth and make noise. You're the one judging yourself to say that you shouldn't.
You got connected with a teacher or who sort of helped you also get into some jazz clubs, like to really stretch yourself. I want people to understand. I think one of the most important concepts in life of everything is sort of mentorship and finding people who want to help you and they want to teach you. They want to be there for you and help you achieve and see things you can't see inside yourself.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that journey for you, because I think you found a great mentor obviously who helped you through some of those things.
Yeah, I have so many amazing people in my life. I truly have been extraordinarily blessed. My teacher, her name was Cynthia Vaughn. Well, she's still around. She's Cynthia Vaughn. But she's an incredible human being, and I knew her back when I was in high school. I would work facilities, cleaning toilets, vacuuming rooms, shoveling horse poop, and babysitting so that I could afford to do vocal lessons with her my senior year. And um, she's just one of those people who is, when I talked about the people who light up the room when they walk into it, she's one of those people. She booms when she walks into the room. She walks into a room, you're like, wow, I wish I had her whatever that is. And she doesn't waste time. And so you want to do something? All right, let's figure it out. Okay. You're going to sing jazz? All right. Well, if you're going to sing jazz, you're going to actually sing jazz. Where do you sing jazz? At a jazz club. That's what happens. That's where the real jazz lives. We're going to do it. And so she was always pushing me, and always in the best reasons, um, seemingly saw so much more talent and value in what I had to offer than I ever did. And it was from her that I learned how to appreciate the skill sets that I did have.
It's fascinating. Every time I speak with somebody who has had, I mean, we all have adversities on our road, but there's some that I think are arguably much tougher than others. It sounds to me like she picked up on what your expectation was for yourself, and she didn't allow you to make excuses for yourself because she knew you wouldn't let you. Like, she
Yeah.
just treated you the way you probably needed and wanted to be treated, because you didn't want to be different. You
Right.
wanted to sing in a jazz club. You wanted to sing jazz. And she embraced that. It's probably really hard for her, I would bet, if we went back and talked to her about it. But it sounds to me like she just stepped in and said, okay, I'm not going to treat you any different than anyone else who tells you their goals. If that's what you want, we're going to go do it.
Well, I think we had a couple of really interesting things at play. One, she had known me since I was in the fifth grade, so she knew how hard I worked. She knew that I was that kid who was happy to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and shovel horse poop. Like, I was going to do anything to get to where I needed to go, and I didn't need the praise for it on my way. I was fine just moving closer to whatever I was trying to accomplish. And on the interesting side, she had never been exposed to another person with my particular issue, quote unquote, uniqueness, difference, disability, whatever you want to label it. She had never been exposed to how do I teach a vocalist at her understanding of vocal level to keep going when she can't hear. Like there it was, we kind of sat in a room and we're just like, we don't know what the rules are. So we didn't have to abide by anything. We didn't listen to anybody else because we were just like, no one else knows. So we're just going to make crap up. And so it gave us a incredible freedom to do things that other people would find to be absolutely ridiculous, because who's to say it's ridiculous if no one's ever played that game before? Who's to say that's not the rule?
Once you started getting out there, you started writing songs again. You started recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
What? How did you hear about America's Got Talent and decide? Yeah, I'll go do that.
They actually emailed me. I had been emailed by a lot of different shows for several years, like X Factor, American Idol, um, and these competition shows. They were always extraordinarily terrifying to me because I don't see myself as the person who is enviable. You know, I'm not the tiniest, most beautiful girl in the room, you know, who just looks like a model and she just also happens to be a powerhouse. You know, I don't feel like I'm necessarily visually what they're looking for. And I don't have the drive to have people in my business all the time. So it was always really scary. But the thing that was the censure for me being able to easily say no to everything beforehand was you had to sing songs that they chose. You were not able to sing songs that you wrote. And when AGT emailed me again, um, this was like, I've been badgered for a while, and I was like, you know, I'm comfortable enough in my own skin. Let me just throw something out to them. If I can sing a song that I wrote, I would consider it. And they're like, interesting. They hadn't really had a lot of people do that, but they did have a girl who won the show the year prior to my season, which was Grace Vanderwall, and she sang her own songs, and that kind of opened the door more for that possibility. And so I had to fly to LA to present my song before they would even, the producers would even allow me the idea of walking on their show and singing it. So when I showed up to do AGT for my actual audition, they had me prepare two songs, one song that was mine and one song that was a jazz standard. I like Cry Me a River. And so I had Cry Me a River in my back pocket in case they told me no. But I told them, you can tell me no, but it's live, baby. Those are my musicians back there. I'm not singing to a track, so I'm gonna tell you what, I'm gonna sing my song. So
And then it obviously the I don't know how many times the audition's been seen now. It's obviously one of their most watched clips ever,
yeah.
and it's amazing. Everyone should watch it. What
Thank you.
is uh, very clearly the judges did not know you had any hearing issues at all,
Yeah,
correct?
my intention. I didn't want to have um this this moment where I had pushed myself and put myself in such a vulnerable place to be judged in front of the world if it wasn't going to be real as much so as anybody else. I didn't want the judges to know who I was before I got onto the stage. I had that contractually agreed that they weren't going to like just push me through because I checked a box for inclusion. I wanted to have an actual audition where I could just be me. And should I not be good enough, I expected them to X me off the show.
When you started singing, could you obviously, Simon Cowell sort of picked up on the fact that you were deaf from
Yeah.
just from the beginning, something, I don't know, he picked up, started having a conversation with you, and then he invited you to sing. When did you were you did you know they were just going to get it because you've done it so many times, or when did you start to see that the audience and the judges were this was working, like they were understanding who you were as an artist in that moment?
Well, I mean, before we started singing, they ask you a lot of questions, and so they get to know who you are at right before you sing, and you have like a minute to display your heart. And for me, I was just honest. I told them very straight up. They're like, "Well, what is your song about?" My song is about giving up and not letting that be the end of the story. Like, I'm tired of giving up. That's what this song is about. And I think the audience really connected more so with the meaning of the song than they did with this idea of, oh, look at that. She's a little deaf girl doing it. She's doing music. Isn't that so cute? It was more like, I feel that way too. Look at her. She actually is doing what she's doing it. She's getting up. And I think that they felt that they were doing it with me, and we became a team in that moment, and it became this very contagious emotion that you could feel in that room. I mean, 5,000 people stood up at the same time, and they were screaming and applauding, but at the same time most of the audience was like holding their hands, and you could see them like holding their breath for a minute as we were finishing, and it was this like, oh, it was palpable. It was a really beautiful moment that I get to hold on to for the rest of my life.
Again, I think one of the greatest lessons anyone could take away from this, and we can turn it into questions because we can do that. But how am I connecting with my audience? How am I connecting with, whether there's an audience of one or a million? That's why it's universal. That's why people work on YouTube. That's what works on TikTok. That's what works on behind a camera. That's what works on stage. That's what works is allowing people into your journey,
Yeah.
not trying to impress people. I think that's just an amazing, just recurring theme in your life. And those who haven't seen the clip, you'll get to see it. But Simon gives you the golden buzzer. He was pretty touched by your performance. I think the world loves Simon because he's always been honest. He's been a bit snarky, but I think he's an honest guy. Tell me your experience with Simon. Tell us what we need to know about Simon.
Well, I mean, every episode that I did, every time I performed on the stage, he made a point to come up onto the stage and give me honest feedback one on one without the cameras picking it up. It was all, he was really trying hard to help me be confident and to reinstate into who I was. It's like you're worthy of being here. Like, um, don't be so worried. You're doing an amazing job, and he was so thankful that I had chosen to do the show, and that I got to be a part of their program. Um, he was very hard on a lot of people. I mean, the couple that was on the stage before my audition, he dismissed them, like they got X'd off. And um funny enough, like they were like the same people who were mocking me during my sound check. They're like, nah, she's not gonna go through. Ugh. And I was just like, "Ooh." People are so harsh in that industry, man. Competitions bring out the worst in people. Um,
Seems like Simon doesn't have any tolerance for lack of self awareness, but
he
if you
doesn't
have
have,
self awareness, he loves it.
yeah, he doesn't enjoy people who are cocky, because there's somebody, more than likely like a billion people, who are
Heavens.
just as good as you or better. And so it's just like, what do you have to be cocky about? Just be yourself. If you're yourself, he can appreciate the work, but he likes people who work. He doesn't like people who are lazy, and he doesn't like people who are overly cocky and just doing whatever they can do to get by. He's just like, look at me. Like, I don't have to. I don't have to look at you. So why should I look at you? And let me remind you of that. Like I think
Yeah.
he gets his jollies off of digging that one in, you know? But he
Well,
was he was
he's
really nice to me.
it's great. I think he's a super talented guy. I'm intrigued by him in general. I just think he's the success he's had, the work ethic he's had, and the way he lays it out straight. And I feel like he is if I feel like he in a lot of cases he gives you back what you give him. So if you give him like if you watch a lot of his stuff, if you give him cockiness, he will give it back to you, whether it's good or bad. It's going to be just fed right back. And if you give him, I think humility and honesty, he'll do the same thing with as much respect as you did. And so as much as he's a sort of a pop music celebrity guy, I think he's an authenticity guy, which I would argue is probably why he's had the success he's had. But I haven't met him yet, but I will one day, and we'll talk more about it on my podcast or documentary or something else. So you went on in that series you crushed it in America's Got Talent. You've now been
He,
back on sort of the All Stars show. From there, once that moment in your life was over, what came next? Like and what's it been like since then? Really, I know a lot's happened.
Man, well, before I went on that show, I was doing some touring. It wasn't crazy heavy, but it was consistent. I was consistently doing gigs. And then after that moment, I was very busy. So I was doing a lot of touring. I think my touring, though, has always had a unique flavor to it that a lot of musicians don't experience. Like, I wouldn't just play a concert and leave. Most of mine, I would do something in the community and then do a concert. So I spent a lot of time seeing schools, talking to students, speaking at libraries, and getting the local community involved, whether that was bringing a bunch of choirs together so that they could sing back up on stage with me, or having presentations where I talked about failure and chasing your dreams, even in the midst of breaking down. I got to help bring people together so that when the show happened, everybody kind of knew each other. And so we were a family in the room. And it was so much of a different energy. And I can't tell you how many people I met who just wanted to have a hug and cry, or just wanted to see another person who had gotten up to see that they was possible for them. And um, as a community, we got to celebrate, and that was beautiful. And that's true today. I just did a tour in Hong Kong, and I did like 10 school visits, and then I spoke for the a couple of companies and corporations and stuff as well while I was there before having our symphony concert. And so that was amazing. I went to Nepal on a group with No Barriers, a nonprofit I'm on the board of, and we took differently abled students hiking in the Himalayan mountains with all of the different disabilities on display in a land where having a disability is a curse. And we got to start a lot of really beautiful, honest conversations, but prove to not only them, but prove to ourselves how much more capable we are than we give ourselves credit for. And I've made albums and I've made music videos, and my music videos incorporate captioning and ASL and visual moments that are representations of the beats. And so it can be a little bit more inclusive. I've helped with Microsoft and gone to their Batcave and tested some of their products and given them feedback on why certain things are not working well for me. And I've given them feedback on stuff like Skype so that we can improve captionings. And I've worked with a lot of different companies over the years to help to push for inclusion, but also encourage people with disabilities to be hired, and not just because they're disabled, because they're qualified. Qualified people who also happen to have a difference in a disability, and helping to get those things kind of connected. I'm working on a children's book. I've been lucky enough to be a part of other people's projects like yours, and where I get to help realize, in my own little way, help you realize one of your dreams. And it's been just a nonstop joy that I hope never ends.
Well, it's a joy for you because you're serving, and it's a joy to work with you. I'm so excited for the world to see Hero, to see your journey. I love the song we wrote for it, the road I'm on.
Thank
I'll
you.
have some more updates on you for you on that soon too, by the way.
Oh,
And man,
you've
always
got
great to.
secrets?
I have
Oh,
secrets. I got good
yeah.
ones. I'm working on a couple things.
Thank you.
But man, it's always so great to spend time with you. I I'm always inspired. I love the time we have. I can't wait to do more projects together. But most importantly, just thank you for showing up the way you do, and thanks for serving our audience here with Questionable, and thanks for joining us on the show.
100%. I'm always here. Always.
Thank you. All right, everybody. We will find you next time right here on the Question Able podcast. Take care.